At 69, Tommy Rich's life is honestly heartbreaking. It's tough to watch a guy who was once such a big star now battling personal demons. Years of substance abuse have really taken a toll, leaving him in a rough and miserable place. Let's dive in and see what exactly caught up with him over the years. Like so many wrestlers from that wild era, Tommy Rich's career didn't just slow down because of age or bad luck. It was deeply affected by personal battles he was fighting behind the scenes. Over the years, stories have come out from fellow wrestlers, promoters, and people who worked closely with him, and they all paint a similar picture of a man who was struggling with some heavy demons. Pills were a big part of it, and that constant fight with substance abuse seemed to follow him everywhere he went. What makes it even sadder is that this wasn't just a random bad habit. In the wrestling world of the late 70s and early 80s, painkillers and other drugs were almost a part of the job. The schedule was brutal, with wrestlers driving hundreds of miles a night, working through injuries, and rarely getting a chance to rest. For someone like Rich, who was thrown into the spotlight so young and rose to fame so quickly, the temptation and the pressure were almost impossible to escape. These habits started to catch up with him, and you could see it in his career. The same guy who once felt unstoppable in the early 1980s, who captured that magical lightning-in-a-bottle moment when he shocked the wrestling world, began to lose that spark. The energy, the consistency, the big-time performances that made him a household name started to fade. It wasn't that he lost his talent, it was that the personal demons he carried made it nearly impossible to keep that fire burning. Many wrestling insiders believe these struggles were one of the key reasons why Rich couldn't hold on to the momentum he built during his peak. Now let's take a look at the side of Tommy Rich we all wish we could have seen for much longer. The energetic, powerful version of him that made fans fall in love in the first place. This was the Tommy who lit up every arena, the one whose fire and charisma made him unforgettable. If those personal issues hadn't gotten in the way, who knows how far that incredible spark could have taken him. Rich first broke into wrestling in 1974, learning the ropes in the Tennessee regional promotions after training under the legendary Jerry Jarrett. Back then, wrestling wasn't about glitz, pyrotechnics, or social media fame. It was about long drives between small towns, gritty arenas filled with cigarette smoke, and fans who believed every punch, every slam, and every feud. And Tommy Rich fit right in. He was hungry, energetic, and willing to take whatever bumps he had to in order to climb the ladder. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, Rich became a familiar face in the National Wrestling Alliance territories of Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. These were the heartlands of old-school wrestling, where the crowds were loud, the rivalries were real to the fans, and the performers gave everything they had night after night. Rich quickly made his mark, capturing dozens of NWA regional titles and becoming a favorite in every arena he stepped into. But what really set him apart was his connection with the fans. Whether he was battling a villainous heel or cutting an emotional promo, Rich had a way of making people feel like they were right there with him, living every moment. By the early 80s, Tommy Rich wasn't just a regional star. He was one of the faces of wrestling on television. He became one of the original stars of the TBS wrestling shows, which were exploding in popularity during the late 70s and early 80s. If you turned on TBS back then, chances are you'd catch Tommy bleeding and brawling with some of the toughest names in the business. His feuds were the stuff of legend. Fans still talk about his bloody battles with Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, Ole Anderson, Ivan Koloff, and the fabulous Freebirds. These weren't just matches. They were wars that had people on the edge of their seats. Every time Rich stepped in the ring, it felt like something wild could happen, and that unpredictable energy made him one of the most beloved wrestlers of the era. Then came the moment that truly cemented his place in wrestling history. On April 27, 1981, in Augusta, Georgia, Tommy Rich shocked the wrestling world by defeating Harley Race to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. It was a dream come true and a sign that Rich had arrived at the absolute top, but the celebration was short-lived. Just 4 days later, Rich lost the belt back to Race in Gainesville. Behind the scenes, it turned out the title change was part of a bigger political struggle in the Georgia territory. Promoter Jim Barnett, who was also a minority owner and the booker of the NWA title, reportedly used the excitement and boosted ticket sales from Rich's win to secure his position in the company. Even though Rich's reign was brief, that victory made history and showed the wrestling world that he could hang with the very best. Of course, championships were only part of Tommy Rich's story. Some of his most memorable moments came from his long-running rivalries, none more famous than his feud with Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. Their battles over the NWA Georgia national title went on for nearly 2 years and became some of the most talked about matches in wrestling at the time. The rivalry reached its unforgettable climax in 1983 with the last Battle of Atlanta, a brutal, fully enclosed cage match that was billed as a last man standing war. For years, fans thought no footage of this historic match existed, making it almost mythical. But in 2016, the WWE Network finally released the full video, giving newer fans a chance to witness the chaos and intensity that defined that showdown. After that war, Rich and Sawyer even tried teaming up for a short time to take on the new powerhouse duo known as the Road Warriors, but the alliance didn't last. Rich soon found himself feuding with Ted DiBiase in another storyline that kept fans hooked. In one of the more creative angles of the era, Rich lost a loser leaves wrestling match, which forced him to leave the territory. But instead of disappearing, he returned under a mask as a mysterious character named Mr. R. DiBiase was convinced it was really Rich under the mask, and in a clever twist, Rich appeared at the announcer's desk during a match while rookie wrestler Brad Armstrong wrestled in the Mr. R disguise. With everyone distracted, Armstrong pinned DiBiase to win the NWA national title, leaving DiBiase furious and the fans thrilled. From there, Rich headed back to Memphis, where he teamed with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert to form a new version of Fargo's Fabulous Ones, after the original duo of Steve Kieran and Stan Lane left the territory. Together, Rich and Gilbert won the AWA Southern Tag Team titles in 1984, proving that Rich was still a top draw. But wrestling friendships rarely stay peaceful for long. After losing the titles, Gilbert turned on Rich in a dramatic and bloody television segment. What started as an award presentation for Tag Team of the Year turned into chaos when Gilbert, thinking Rich wasn't around, began insulting his former partner. Rich stormed out, and the two ended up in a violent confrontation that left Gilbert bloodied. In a shocking twist, Gilbert later pretended to apologize, only to betray Rich again by smashing his head into the ring post. It was classic Memphis storytelling, raw, emotional, and unforgettable. Even as the years went on, Tommy Rich kept finding ways to stay relevant. He worked in Southeast Championship Wrestling before returning to Memphis in 1987, where he played a key role in one of the greatest feuds in wrestling history, Austin Idol versus Jerry Lawler. This rivalry lasted over a year and featured some of the most dramatic moments Memphis wrestling had ever seen. In one legendary night, Rich hid under the ring for the entire show, waiting to interfere in a high-stakes cage match between Idol and Lawler. His surprise attack helped Idol win, leading to Lawler's humiliating head shaving and sparking one of the most shocking heel turns of Rich's career. After that, Rich eventually made his way to the AWA, where he turned face once again and found himself in feuds with Adrian Adonis. By 1989, Tommy Rich found himself back in familiar territory when he returned to the Georgia scene, now rebranded as World Championship Wrestling after Ted Turner purchased the company. WCW was trying to freshen things up with a mix of new talent and proven veterans, and Rich was brought in as one of the recognizable faces fans still loved. Eddie Gilbert reintroduced him on TV, and Rich immediately set his sights on U.S. champion Lex Luger. He picked up early wins, even teaming with family members Johnny and Davey Rich. But the momentum didn't last. With rising stars like Brian Pillman and the Great Muta, and established names like Ricky Steamboat and Terry Funk grabbing the spotlight, Rich was soon bumped down the card. Despite the slide, Rich kept fighting. He challenged Luger in house show matches, teamed with Gilbert, and even scored TV victories over talents like Cactus Jack and Bam Bam Bigelow. By 1990, he was in better shape and slowly climbing back, teaming with Tim Horner and Ricky Morton, even scoring a pay-per-view win over the Midnight Express. He ended the year stronger than he started, proving he still had plenty of fire. In 1991, Rich joined Morton and Junkyard Dog to win the WCW six-man tag team titles, a brief high point before another drop. He eventually turned heel and became Thomas Rich in the York Foundation, but the gimmick didn't save his spot. By 1992, he left WCW and worked the independent circuit, later popping up in USWA, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and even ECW, where he led the full-blooded Italians. After ECW closed, Rich kept busy on the indie scene, wrestling at small shows, signing autographs, and teaming with old friends like Ricky Morton. Decades later, he still makes appearances, proving his love for wrestling never really faded. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more classic wrestling stories like this one.